What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's team selection for game week 8. So I'm going to run you through how my team is looking, what my possible transfers could be, and then what I'm thinking about when I'm choosing between wildcard and in game week 8, which I may still do this week, or possibly delaying it until game week 9. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you are new around here as well. So this is going to look a little bit different to a normal team selection video. We're not going to go through game week 7 because obviously no one scored any points. I did make 2 free transfers last week, so I did Trent Alexander-Arnold to Trippier, and I did Greenwood to Mitrovic. That was to try and catch some price rises. Since I've done that, both Mitrovic and Trippier have gone up in price, and I kind of figured that I'd want them from kind of game weeks 8 and 9 onwards anyway, so that's why I used my 2 free transfers. So I'm not going to go through defence, midfield and forwards. We're just going to get more into whether or not I should be wildcarding and the transfers. Now, I've only got 1 free transfer, so to get 11 players out, I need to take a hit. I've got Salah, Diaz, Cucurella, Gross and Dunk missing. It's a little bit annoying. I'm sure a lot of you that have got Brighton players that the train strikes are called off, but that match is still off. But obviously we're all trying to, from an FPL point of view, deal with different things. So it's not the end of the world. So this is how I'm looking. Now, the possible transfers I could do all involve getting Salah out. And once I do that, I'm basically locking in the wild card for game week 9. Some of you will now be thinking about a game week 13 wild card. And for some teams, that will definitely be doable. The advantages to game week 13 wild card is you can start getting rid of your Arsenal and Man City players in the run up to that blank in game week 12, also bearing in mind that Liverpool and Man City play each other in game week 11, and then you can obviously wildcard them back in. But my team, I've looked through various different scenarios about trying to avoid the wildcard until 13. It just doesn't work. So either way, I'm using it this week or next week. That is pretty much locked in. So if I get rid of Salah this week, I would probably want him back next week, so I would use my wildcard to do that. And the thing is, I could do, a lot of people are going to be looking at like Salah to Kane and then getting a cheaper midfielder in. That just doesn't work for my team because I've got Haaland, Jesus and Mitrovic, and I can't warrant using a transfer and getting rid of one of them when they've got a game this week, and all of them have got pretty good games as well. So the only moves really are Salah and Diaz out, or Salah and one of the defenders, right? So the first move that looks the most, I would guess, obvious for my team is Salah to Son and Diaz to Bowen. Now, this isn't without its risk, because I am a little bit concerned about whether Son will start. I think there's been calls for him to be not necessarily dropped, but possibly rested, because Richarlison's playing well. They've taken Kulusevski out of the team. They're not maybe looking quite as good. So I think a lot of people expect Kulusevski to come back in, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Richarlison will miss out. The only thing with Son is, because I don't want to scaremonger people, he has started every single game this season. There's nothing to say that he won't start against Leicester before the international break. And I think you can frame it one of 2 ways. Maybe Conte needs to just take him out for just 1 week, give him a little bit of a rest, and then carry on playing him after the international break. Or you could frame it that he needs to play him because he needs a goal. He needs to get that confidence back. So I think right now, I'm not panicking about Son, but if there's any inclination that he's not going to start, I pretty much will just use the wild card this week, because I think at that point my team just needs it. The problem for me is I can't get Saka because I've already got triple Arsenal, and again, there's no reason to take out any of those players this week, and I can't get De Bruyne because I've already got triple Man City. So I am kind of like, it's almost like tunnel vision. I have to get Son. He's the only one, like the big hitter that I can get because of how my team is set up. Again, it's a little bit unfortunate, but that's the way things are. I've had a pretty good season so far, so I'm not too worried. So that would be one move. Then the other one will be Diaz to Bowen, because you can be pretty assured that Bowen is going to start, right? Even if he plays kind of 90 minutes in Europe, you're always expecting him to start the next game. So that's probably my number 1 choice for transfers this week. And obviously they all involve a 4-point hit, because I want to get 11 players out while I've got the money to do it. The other one would be exactly the same players out, Son still in, and then Kulusevski in. I would absolutely need to know that Kulusevski is going to start to make that move. I just really like to target that Leicester fixture, but I think if I'm just doing it on, well, you know, the fans and stuff say that Kulusevski should probably come back in and Son will probably still start, I don't know if that's enough for me to go for it when I haven't got a bench. I think I need to be a little bit more sure about the minutes of the players I'm bringing in. So I like that move on paper. I think it's better than the Bowen move, but with Bowen, you know you're going to get minutes. And then the third transfer is similar in that Perisic could be great if he starts against Leicester at home, but there's no guarantee that happens. I think there's there's kind of like conflicting reports. That I didn't watch the Spurs game in the Champions League, but there's conflicting reports. Some people say that Perisic played well. Others are saying it's probably time for Sessegnon to come into the team for this week at least anyway. Not to say that Perisic is now going to be on the bench every week, but possibly this week. So again, there's a little bit of risk there. It would essentially be Perisic versus Kulusevski versus Bowen. In every scenario, I'd bring in Son. So that's one move I could make. And obviously then if we come back to the team, if you imagine Son is where Salah is and Bowen's where Diaz is, that's 11 players that I think look pretty good this week, right? Because I don't have double Newcastle defence, but I do have double City against Wolves away, and I think that's pretty good. So that's why I'm wavering about wildcard. It's like I've said all week, if I had to take a -8 to fix this team, I would definitely just wildcard. And I think even with a -4, I am very close, because I would obviously save that points hit, and then I would hope to gain extra points elsewhere. I think the main issue is the wildcard team that I would like from Game Week 9 onwards is a little bit different to Game Week 8 wildcard, and that just worries me a little bit. So here are some kind of... These are my concerns for Game Week 8. And again, loads of you should be wildcarding this week because of the way your team is. But for me, it's a little bit different. It's a bit closer. So I think I'd mostly be looking for Game Week 9 onwards. So I'd possibly lose a little bit this week because I'd have my focus from 9 onwards. So I don't know whether the gain would be there. I think, again, if Son is going to be missing, then it's probably a no-brainer to wildcard. Maddison and Zaha are definitely players that I would be looking at from Game Week 9 onwards. But again, most of their gains are from 9 and 10 onwards, not in Game Week 8. Zaha has a blank this week, and Maddison plays Spurs away. Of course, if you want Maddison for the long term, you could just have him in your team, but it isn't a great fixture this week. Not when I've got Saka and Martinelli. Who is it I've got? I've forgotten now. Yeah, Martinelli, Andreas, right? And look, Maddison could be better than Andreas, of course, but I think I'm okay playing him this week. And if I get Son and Bowen, that also seems better than Maddison for me. So yeah, those are two players I would want long term, but the gains you get from them are not this week. Having looked at various different wildcards, the main swaps would be Son. So if he starts, let's just say he does start, then it's him versus Kane. I've got Jesus, I would probably have Saka instead. I've got Gabriel, I would probably have Zuma or Shah instead. You could probably say that Shah is a little bit better in that Newcastle defence against Bournemouth than Gabriel is against Brentford, but that would also be a triple up on Newcastle defence, so that worries me a little bit. And then it's Edison in goal instead of Pope. So if on paper, if I was free hitting this week, I probably would take Kane, Saka, one of those defenders, and Pope over who I will probably have, Son, Jesus, Gabriel and Edison, but it's pretty close. And again, I don't think it's a massive, you have to wildcard that, which is why I'm a little bit unsure. And I know a lot of people will say, well, if you're going to wildcard this week, you should have already hit the button. I think the last 2 seasons for my first wildcard, I've used it on the deadline stream, not for content or anything like that, because I'm happy to just wait and give myself enough thinking time, get enough info as I can and stuff like that. What if we find out in the deadline stream Son isn't starting? Well, then suddenly I'll wildcard, and it won't be a panic because I'll already have made my wildcard draft for Game Week 8, so it won't take too much to just do that, right? So I'm not really worried about that. I'm not locked in either way. If I'm not going to be happy enough to captain Kane over Haaland, there's not as much upside, right? Whether I have Son or Kane in my team, if I'm captaining Haaland anyway, that upside's kind of gone. I know a lot of people are looking to get Kane in this week and captain him ahead of Haaland. If I was doing that, maybe there's a bit more upside. I just don't know if I want to back against Haaland. I know some people are thinking, will he or won't he start this week? I think he probably will start, right? We just got to assume that at this point. But it was a Wednesday night Champions League game and then a noon kickoff on Saturday for Man City. So maybe there's a little bit more threat about his minutes, but I do think he'll start either way. Obviously, I've got the Edison and Cancelo double up, which definitely helps because a lot of people had like Sanchez and then they had Reece James, for example. And so they're trying to fill those gaps with Pope and Trippier and maybe another Newcastle defender. For me, look, Trippier and Pope could absolutely outscore Cancelo and Edison, but it's not something that I would be massively panicked about. Then I've got to decide whether saving that 4-point hit is worth it rather than just having the international break to have a think and try and rearrange my team a little bit more. And then obviously there's a few advantages with Game Week 9 where you can save a few extra transfers. You could maybe go without Cancelo because he'd have Man United at home, Southampton at home, Liverpool away, and then a blank. So there are ways you can maybe go without him and then look to get him later on. You wouldn't have to have Saka. You could just have Maddison and Zaha from the get-go. So essentially, although I'd have to take a hit this week, I would probably probably save transfers down the line if I went for a Game Week 9 wildcard. So that's my concerns, that's the teams, that's the transfers. Let's take a look at what the wildcard teams would look like and where the differences are. So like I said, this team selection video is going to look a little bit different to normal. There's going to be lots of thinking out loud as I run you through different wildcard scenarios for Game Week 8 or Game Week 9, because ultimately that is the decision that I'm having to make, why certain players are picked, what the transfer routes would be, how to get back to Salah, and kind of all that good stuff. So this is on a website called FPL.team, which is a transfer planner website if you haven't already checked it out. And this is how my Game Week 8 wildcard looks like. So you can see up there, this is for Game Week 8, and I've got 0.3 million in the bank. If I needed to save a bit more money, I might do Shah to Botman, but I have got triple Newcastle defence. We'll come on to that in a minute. Don't panic about where my captain's armband is and the vice captain and stuff like that. I never bother changing it on a transfer planner. It just doesn't make sense, right? There's no need to. I'm going to do that on the FPL website itself. So first of all, before we talk about Newcastle, let's talk about Harry Kane. I am still on this draft rather than having one that a lot of people are going for, where they have De Bruyne and then an easy route back to Salah. And part of that thinking is captaincy. So this week, you're obviously not going to captain Salah. He's got no fixture. You could go for Haaland. You could go for Kane if you wanted to go for a bit of upside, because Leicester at home right now looks like a really, really good fixture, despite how maybe poor Spurs were in the Champions League during midweek. Leicester at home is a much easier game. And then in Game Week 9, you've got Haaland versus Man United at home and Salah versus Brighton at home. So you don't necessarily need to go for Salah that week. You could argue he's a better captain if you think Man United defence has improved, but I think most people will go for Haaland. Game Week 10, there's no question, right? Haaland plays Southampton at home. You're definitely going to go for him over Salah against Arsenal away. And look, I would be happy to have Salah in my team, but from a captaincy perspective, it's going to be Haaland. And then in Game Week 11, they play each other. So then instead, if you don't want to captain Haaland against Liverpool away, arguably his hardest fixture all season, then you've got Mitrovic at home to Bournemouth, who could be a good option if you don't want to go for the Kane route. But you've also got Kane versus Everton at home, who could be the slightly better option. So I think with this way, it just gives you slightly more potential points over the next 4 game weeks, and then you need to find a way to get Salah back. Now, obviously, if you're wildcarding in Game Week 8, because of the blanks, you are limited in the defenders you can choose, which is why I've got the Newcastle triple up. I know people really frown on triple ups, and it can be extremely frustrating when a clean sheet gets wiped out, especially when it's early in the game, where you can imagine no one's expecting Bournemouth to score. They go and score in the first 5 minutes. It's very frustrating, but most people are going to have Pope and Trippier anyway. So what's one more defender, right? And it helps you out down the line, although you will have to play probably triple Newcastle defence as well a little bit later on. So you could go for Luka Dean instead. I think he's around the same price. But the problem I have with him is he's good for this week, but not necessarily as good after this week. I just don't like the fixtures for Aston Villa that much in terms of the fixtures you're actually going to play him in. And if you're wildcarding, I would highly recommend checking out a planner like this, going through the next few weeks and actually figuring out when you need those bench players, because then you can choose different defenders depending on the weeks you have to bring them in. So that's why I've got the triple up on Newcastle defence. I think it's a pretty good fixture this week. I think if you are wildcarding this week, you've probably got to have at least some players on the bench that you want longer term, even if they don't have a fixture this week. So it could be Maddison. You could play him this week, of course, but you could bench him as well. I've gone for Zaha and James. And then Zuma just fits. He just helps me out later on. Right? I'm not saying you have to go out of your way to get him in. But after seeing the Chelsea lineup last night, no Fofana, no Koulibaly. Look, it was Potter's first game in charge. He might have gone with experienced players he knows, like obviously Azpilicueta for the experience, Cucurella, he knows him at left centre-back. But it does worry me a little bit that he could tinker around enough that Fofana isn't an option. And we're not going to find out any more now, because Chelsea don't play again until after the Game Week 9 deadline. So that's not even going to help us whether you wildcard this week or next week. So I probably wouldn't go for Fofana for that reason. Obviously, Andreas Pereira is okay to play this week. Mitrovic as well. Bowen is just in for long-term fixtures and an okay one this week. And then I've got Saka. You could start with Maddison if you want to save a transfer down the line, but I've gone for Saka. So that's Game Week 8. You move straight on to Game Week 9. Obviously, you probably put Zaha in for Andreas. Straight away, you're getting rid of Shah for James, so you're not playing triple Newcastle defence every single week. And you could even play Zuma ahead of Trippier if you really wanted to. I don't think I would, though. And then you can make a decision here. You can keep hold of Saka, or you can do the Saka to Maddison moves there. So that's game week 9. Obviously, this is all hoping that everything goes correct. I think one of the issues with game week 8 wildcards, you're booking in a lot of transfers, and if other stuff starts going wrong, you might be in a position where you're having to take a lot of hits. But then again, I'm probably going to take a hit this week. Your wildcard is saving that, so maybe it's not a big issue. Then we move on to game week 10. I think this week you don't need to make a transfer. You could play Zuma or Shah instead of Martinelli if you wanted to. Most of us will just play Martinelli, so it's not a big issue. Obviously, Bowen, Maddison and Zaha have all got good fixtures, and everything else you're happy with. Cancelo's got Southampton at home. So you can roll it into game week 10. Game week 11. And obviously, Man City have got Liverpool away, but you don't need to necessarily go out of your way to get rid of these players if you don't want to. So you could, if you had the money, just go to Trent Alexander-Arnold. And now I'm going through this. Now I realise why I had Botman at the start, because he saves 0.3 million and it gives you a route back to Trent. So we'll just ignore that for now, that I've not got enough money, because I do in an actual... if I go for Botman instead of Shah, right? And then you come on to game week 12, and this is probably the week where you need to start getting Salah back. Now, you could potentially do Haaland to Salah, but then you've got to buy him back for more expense, right? If you've had him since the start, you've made money on him, so I probably wouldn't do that. I would probably play Shah, and then I would have to play Zuma. Now, this is where you might want to choose a different defender, and then we'd do Kane to probably Solanke, and then Bowen to Salah. And that would be how I would get Salah back. And I would just roll like that. You could play Andreas Pereira if you wanted to instead of Zuma as well. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm not going to go any more weeks, right? You've then got Haaland on the bench. You're missing out on Cancelo, so you might want to think about a way to get him back. But ultimately, things look pretty good on the Game Week 8 wildcard. The other option is to go for something like this and start with De Bruyne and enough money in the bank to go to Salah. I think the only slight issue I have is I do think Solanke from game week 9 onwards is pretty good, but he's not someone I would want in game week 8. I think Kane is better. I think Jesus, if you're sticking with him, is better. Isak is better. I just don't know if I would want Solanke in there, but I think if I was going to get Salah back easily, I would have to have him. And again, Collins is just on the bench to serve a purpose later on, so you'd still have the triple up. You'd move on to game week 9, De Bruyne to Salah. You'd probably just keep Saka in there for this week, and again, just bring James on, etc., etc., right? We don't need to go through the whole weeks, but that's how I would set up, and then Saka to Zaha would happen in game week 10, and then obviously you'd have one transfer for game week 11, etc., etc. So I think that's the way I would look at if I wanted Salah in quickly, and obviously that's up to you to decide how quickly you want that. I would probably go for something like this, but it would mean having Solanke from game week 8, and I just think he's a better option from kind of game week 9 onwards. So let's take a look at what a potential Game Week 9 wildcard could look like. I'm not saying it would be exactly the same as this come the Game Week 9 deadline, but I don't think it would be too far off. And if you are unsure between 8 and 9 like I am, it's worth building a wildcard squad for both weeks just to see what the differences are and what some of the benefits might be. So for this one, I've actually got 1.6 million in the bank. I'm not sure whether I would actually leave that there, but right now I think the team looks pretty good with it in. I've got Ward in goal and Guaita on the bench. They do rotate pretty nicely, and you would play Guaita most of the time. I know Crystal Palace defence hasn't been great so far this year, but they've had pretty bad fixtures, and last season the defence was pretty decent. So you could back him, but I could go for Pope instead. That is, of course, nothing's locked in at this point. I've not even hit the wildcard button. But even if I went for Pope, I definitely wouldn't have triple Newcastle defence on a wildcard game week 9. I think some of the big differences are you can save yourself some transfers, or at least you can take a few extra risks, right? So in my game week 8 wildcard, I had both Cancelo and Saka, and eventually the idea would be to do Cancelo to Trent and Saka to Zaha, or Saka to Maddison, whatever you want to do, whichever way you kind of line it up. But you're booking in a lot of transfers, and especially if you go for Kane, you're also then trying to figure out how to get Salah back down the line. With game week 9, you could take the risk not to have Cancelo from the start, which I know to a lot of people is going to sound absolutely crazy, but if you look at the fixtures for City, if you think Man United can score, I know Cancelo's attacking, but if you think Man United can score and they lose the clean sheet, then realistically the only real good game in the next 4 game weeks is Southampton at home, because they're potentially going to lose the clean sheet to Man United. In game week 11, they've got Liverpool away, and in game week 12, they blank, which is why the fixture isn't here. So on game week 9, I think you definitely take the risk to go without Cancelo, and get like a transfer ahead of everyone else, because people on Game Week 8 wildcards or who don't have the wildcard might be looking at how they deal with that. You can deal with it straight away. You might get kind of you might miss out on some points when you play Southampton at home, of course, but I think at some point you've got to take a few risks like that because of the fixtures. There's also no need to have Saka in. You can just have Maddison and Zaha from the start. I actually don't have Bowen in this team. That is because in Game Week 8 you want him for the fixture in Game Week 8. In Game Week 9 you're not worried about that, and you've already got Salah straight in, so you're not needing to do that switch. And I know Solanke's in there and a lot of people don't like him, but he's 5.7 million. He's nailed for 90 minutes. The fixtures are pretty good, right up until Game Week 16, and he's on penalties as well. So I don't expect Bournemouth to score a lot of goals, but I do expect him to be involved when they do. Brentford at home in 9, Leicester at home in 10, Fulham away in 11, Southampton at home in 12. I just think if an enabler midfielder for the same price had those fixtures, we'd be keen on them. I know there's a lot of love for forwards this year. I completely get that. People want Isak and Tony in there, maybe Harry Kane. But if you could get a midfielder for 5.7 million, nailed on for 90 minutes with penalties, you'd probably take them. So I don't see why we wouldn't do it for Solanke, especially if you're happy with Maddison and Zaha. If you're not, then you could go for a cheaper midfielder instead and have one of those Isaks or Tonys in there. But I've gone for Solanke, right? And then obviously you might as well start with Trent Alexander-Arnold if you're not going to have Cancelo. And then Justin and Zuma on the bench because they serve a purpose later on for different fixtures. So I think the big plus for Game Week 9 is you can set your team up in a way to need less transfers, whereas everyone else is booking in a lot of transfers. It might be the case that they get away with it. There's no injuries and stuff like that. They just make their planned transfers, happy days. But if stuff starts happening with players, being in and out of form, in and out of the team, getting injuries and stuff like that, there could be an advantage to not having to make so many transfers with this team. So in Game Week 10, as you can imagine, you're just rolling here. There's not really anything to kind of think about. You just play all the same players again. And then in Game Week 11, this is where you can make an interesting choice if you want to. And don't worry about Ward versus Guaita. I'm not going to mess around with them for the purposes of this video. Haaland's got Liverpool away, right? You could remove him for Harry Kane. Bearing in mind, you haven't had any other transfers to make just yet. He could be one of your moves, right? And you could play Justin ahead of Trippier if you wanted to, and if you wanted to hedge your bets, you could go Justin and Guaita instead of Ward and Justin, right? But who cares about that right now? So you could do Haaland to Kane, and you've only used one transfer. You got 1.9 million in the bank. In Game Week 12, there's not really a huge amount of moves for me to make, to be honest, because at this point I'd only have Martinelli with a blank, because I've not got Cancelo and I've not got Haaland either. So I would probably just play Trippier. I don't even know what the other transfer would be right now. So maybe that's something to think about, because it is good to maximise points with your transfers. But having that flexibility is also nice. So this would be the team, and you wouldn't have to worry about Haaland until Game Week 13, where again you got 2 free transfers, and again the team looks pretty good. If you don't want to play Trippier against Tottenham, you play Zuma instead against Bournemouth. I know I'd have Solanke against Zuma, but whatever, I'm not really bothered about that. Justin comes out for Martinelli, who's obviously back now with good fixtures, and everyone else still looks pretty good. And if you wanted Haaland straight back, you could, right? And you'd have enough money to do it. Yes, you've lost 0.3 million, but you get to captain Kane in Game Week 11, you have him for Game Week 12 when other people have got Haaland for Liverpool away and then a benching. So again, I don't know if I'd definitely do that, but the option is there. And then you've still got one other transfer if you need to. I think the biggest thing is, how do you get Cancelo back? That is possibly a problem with the way this team is set up. But then it just continues to look pretty good, right? Maddison can go back to Saka for this week. And then you've got 2 Arsenal attackers against Nottingham Forest at home. Trippier comes back in for Zuma. James and Trent have still got good fixtures. I kind of like the Game Week 9 wildcard, right? I think it saves a lot of hassle. It saves a lot of transfers. It gives you that Haaland to Kane switch if you're feeling a little bit lucky, right? I know most people won't want to do it, but it's an option that's there. So I kind of like that option for the Game Week 9 wildcard if you can get away without Game Week 8. If I don't think Son's going to start, I'm just going to hit the wildcard in Game Week 8. That's how close it is. I think people need to just not panic, right? If you need to use it this week, just use it. You have to adapt to the players you can pick from. You have to work out the blanks and what your future moves might be. But it could be very profitable from a points perspective. But I do now like the idea of just saving it till Game Week 9, because I think there are some added benefits there for my team. So that's what I'm thinking about. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Am I going crazy? Should I be looking at Game Week 9 or should I just use it this week? Are you going to captain Kane this week? Would you captain him in Game Week 11? Would you take out Haaland? Probably not, I suspect. If you've enjoyed that video, I know it was a lot of kind of, there are always obviously a lot of talking from me, but a lot of kind of thinking out loud. But I think it's useful for both me and hopefully for you as well to kind of get where I'm at and where I'm thinking. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, please do give it a like, hit that subscribe button. We might be back later for another video. If not, we'll definitely have one tomorrow morning, then the deadline stream ahead of the Friday deadline as well. So don't miss that out, and I'll catch you again soon.